lab number 8, and this lab is just kind of a fun lab. I'm going to teach you one tool that you haven't used yet and a couple new techniques. But this is what I'm calling my monsters lab. So I'd like you to take a portrait of yourself or some friends. It could be any picture you want, and turn them into monsters, spooky creatures, vampires, werewolves, ghouls, whatever you want. It's up to you, and you should have fun with it. I chose this image here because it's actually an emulation of a Sally Mann photo, this one here. So you probably remember these, looking at these at the beginning of the semester. She took pictures of her kids, and these teens recreated that photo. And I chose this too because I thought that they looked kind of like they could be vampires. So I just saved this image, and when I did search for it, I searched for large images because I want them to be pretty high res. So you're going to be searching for your backgrounds and all of the features, the monster features. You can search for those online. Okay, so we're going to go into our photo, and I'm going to drag these things in here. So I'm going to start with that photo. I'm just going to put that in there, and then I'm going to make a duplicate copy, duplicate layer. Always want to do that step. And then I'm going to put my background in there too. So I'm going to just drop it right on top there because I want to conform it to the size of this image, and I thought I would put them in a cave. So I found an image of a cave online, pretty large image, and then I'm going to commit that by hitting return. And then before I jump out of there, since I'm already there, I'm going to go to Hue Saturation and create an adjustment layer. And then I'm going to drop the saturation down so that I have a nice black and white cave. Okay? All right, so the next thing I want to do is actually want my figures to be first and then my background to be last, because I'm going to separate with my selection tool the background from the figures here. So you guys already know all these steps, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to start selecting the background. And this is something you actually learned in when you were editing your motion photos, is that it's a little bit harder to select out a background even with this small tool that's blurry. So it takes a little bit more tweaking to do this. And then I'm going to zoom in a bit. And I definitely want to grab any of the negative spaces I see between their arms. This one's tricky. It always wants to grab that other arm when I go here. Yep. So I'm going to have to kind of go back and forth on that. So again, I hit the minus sign and I kind of push it back. I go back to the plus sign and I grab this space. And I'm going to do this, I'm doing this fast, but I would like you to be careful and slow down and really grab your edges, make them nice and crisp. I'm just going to jump over the hair because the hair is really similar in texture to the blurry background. And of course, this is a great example of a shallow depth of field shot where the figures are in the foreground are sharp and the background is blurry. It's a wonderful way to really create an emphasis on something, and in this case, of course, it's the figures. See, it just wants to jump into that light area because it's very similar to the hair. So you just have to kind of babysit it a little bit and push it back and forth until you have your edge that you want. Drop this down in there. Of course, it's going to go further than I want. So I'm going to push it back. And try to get the edge of his ear and his hair. He's got good hair, good dark hair for a vampire already. They also have this sort of like look on their face, this sort of like attitude that I think has really made me think of vampire. Okay, so my computer, as you're watching this happen, see it's thinking, working on my laptop right now, which does not have as much power as the desktops that you guys are working on. So when it starts to make that fan noise, I know that it's working hard. So Bear with me. A little bit slower. So I'm going to be giving the girl on the right here that I'm working on right now some sort of scary white eyes with black pupils. It's part of this lab. And you can add, there's no limit or max to what you add. You can add as many things as you want, and really this lab is kind of designed for you to have fun with it. It's sort of an interim project and lab before we start working on our cultural diptychs again. Okay, so I'm going to back it up and just take another look, make sure I got everything. I think there's one more little part here. It's hard to see because her hair is dark, but I think there's a little negative space right here. Okay. And this is tricky too because her hair gets real wispy right there. So I'll just leave it like that. All right, next step, save your selection, background, and then I'm going to inverse it, and I'm going to call that, and then I have to inverse it, and then I have to save it as figures. Okay, so now I have both of those selections saved. So now this part is kind of new, and I want you to just watch carefully if you've never done Photoshop before. All right. So at the moment, we have the figures, we have this photograph in front of the background. And we know this because it's on top in our layers here. So it comes at the top before the background. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that our photograph is selected down here in layers. So click on that, and then we want to go up to select, and we're going to load the background. Okay, so now we have the background loaded. And it doesn't change because, you can't tell the marching answer in both places in the figure selection and the background selection. So, but we know we've loaded the background. So the only thing, now what we're going to do is erase. But the only thing that's going to get erased right now is the background because it's the only thing that's selected. So we're going to go over to our eraser tool, and if this isn't showing up, remember if you hold down Option and click, you're going to get different options. Okay, so we have an eraser tool, a background eraser tool, and a magic eraser tool. So you want the eraser tool. You can change the size of the tool and the hardness of the tool up here. So you want it to be as hard as possible and a pretty good size. And you're just going to start erasing your background. And you can see it's erasing only the background that you selected, and it's revealing the cave in the background. So that's kind of cool. So now all of a sudden, our vampires are in a spooky cave. Make sure I get all my negative spaces. Good coverage. And you can see as you're watching, see what happened over here? All of a sudden we have that checkerboard which tells us it's been erased. And we can also hide our figures and see that we've got the whole background on there. Okay? So now what we want to do is we want to soften our edges, right? Because we don't want our edges to be crisp. So what we're going to do is double click on that, cancel that, sorry, go up to adjustment layers, you want your levels, and you can mess with your levels a little bit if you want to brighten up the background a little bit. I would make it too dark because I want you to see something here. If it's really dark, then our cut edge is super obvious, especially in the hair. So I'm going to actually show you a clone stamping trick to brighten up that background so that hair edge is not so obvious. So you mess with this a little bit, and then you do that mostly because I want to go into my mask edge here. And again, I'm using my red, and I'm going to feather my edge just so that that edge is a little softer. Probably won't need to shift the edge much. So I've softened that edge, which helps. But we still see here that we've got this really cut out look here and here. So the reason we can see that, and it's so obvious, is that the background's so dark and the figure's hair is so light. So I'm going to show you how to do some clone stamping of the background to fix that, or make it not as obvious. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the background and we're going to zoom in. So I'm holding down Command and the plus key, and we're going to look at this. So I'm going to sort of eyeball and say, okay, her hair edge is right in the middle of that recessed area. Then I'm going to hide her and go back to my thing here, and then there's a clone stamp. It's right here. So I'm going to go up to my clone stamp, and I'm going to look at the size. So maybe I want to make it a little bit bigger and make sure it's a soft edge is chosen. Okay, and I'm going to make sure I'm on the right thing. So background. And then in order to make this work, here. Okay, so sometimes I have to go back and forth just to make sure it's just like a little bit slow. So I'm on clone stamp, and then in order to grab a texture, I have to hold down the option key. So I'm going to grab a lighter texture. I'm going to click it, and then I'm going to move it, and then you see how it stamps it there. I'm going to make my brush a little bigger. Okay, and then option and click. Now this is tricky. It takes a little practice to learn how to do this, because if you grab too many of the same spots, then your clone stamp is going to start looking a little bit repeated. So I think I need even bigger clone stamp here. So my objective is really to brighten up this dark recess so that my hair doesn't look so cut out. So I'm kind of grabbing from all over here. And I'm trying to make that transition subtle so it doesn't, this is what you don't want. You don't want to grab that and put it right there, unless you're creating a whole other rock edge. Okay, so it's a gradual process, or you could kind of like extend this rock edge out if you want to, but again, you don't want it to look, see how it's starting to look a little repeated there? And you just have to be careful about that. So take your time with that. I'm going to go a little faster here because I want you to see. So then once in a while I'm going to go back and I'm going to put that there. So, oh my goodness. Okay. So I kind of want to get like this value behind her hair here so that I can hide the fact that it looks so cut out. Maybe put some of this texture, because we're not even going to see that texture because it's behind her. So I'm just going to kind of fill in this area with some of this stuff. I mean, you could just really work on this forever. You could totally change the entire cave, interior of the cave, by doing this. Okay, so I'm going to look again, getting closer, but this looks bruised over here. So I'm gonna go in and mess with this area here. You know, and talk to the students in class that have taken Photoshop before, and they can probably teach us some other tricks too. This is just a very quick way of doing this. And I want you to see what happens. So look at the edge here. The difference between that edge and what's happening up here is drastic. So we want more soft value against that edge. So sometimes photoshopping is a labor of love. So keep doing that until this lighter edge here, and then you can also soften this up too. Like if you go to this and you maybe make your brush a little bit smaller, you can start doing the same to her hair. Like you can soften up that line of her hair if you're clicked on her figure, you can get rid of that too. Get rid of that hard edge. So combination of messing with your background and messing with your figure will really make that look more realistic. Okay, so we're going to stop doing that. I could work on that for hours. Okay, and you want to do the same thing over here. That looks a little bit false to me. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is how to add your cool, creepy features. So I grabbed some vampire eyes here, and I'm going to drag them. Here she is. I want to drag her into Photoshop. And there she is. Okay, so I'm going to hit return and commit her. And then what I need to do is I need to zoom into her eyes here, and I'm going to click the selection tool, and I'm going to grab those eyes with the eyebrow. And I'm going to grab both of them. Photoshop's thinking for a second. It's lovely. Okay. And I want to make sure to grab that pupil too. Grab the whole thing because I like those eyebrows and the makeup. It's sort of all part of the vampire look here. You can hear my computer working hard again. Okay. All right. You know what to do here. Save selection. Eyes. Whoops. Let me jump back. I don't know why that happened. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to go save selection. Eyes. Okay. And then I'm going, now that I've saved it and I have this as a layer, I'm going to hit Command C. And what Command C does is because those eyes are selected, it's going to copy those eyeballs. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to go back to my figure and I'm going to Command V and paste those eyeballs right in there. Okay, now I need to transform those eyeballs. So this is my new eyeball layer. And I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, Scale, and you'll see this little thing that kind of pops up around the eyes. And again, I have to zoom in now so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to drag those eyes over to her eyes. And I can make her look really kind of cartoony, but I think I'm going to try to stick with realism here. So just go ahead and transform those eyes until they kind of fit and they look like they're in the right spot. A little big, a little too big still. And you can drag it a bit as well. And when you have it where you want it, just hit return. And then this is another trick that I haven't taught you yet. I want the eyes and the figure layer to be the same. So I'm going to click on the eye layer and then hold shift down and click on the background layer. And then I'm going to hold my option key down. Pardon me. Start over. Shift, command key. Nope. Shift, control key. Merge layers. And now the eyes and the face are one layer. So now I can go in and use the clone stamping tool again. So I'm clicked on this layer. I go up to clone stamp. I want to make it a little bit tinier. And what I'm going to do, yes I know, I'm going to click on option. And then I'm going to use the skin option click to kind of soften that makeup. Maybe make this a little smaller. Okay. And give her a nice smoky eye and make it look like I didn't just cut and paste those eyeballs into. Now you can do this with anything. You can add, you know, scary fangs and any of the vampire features you want to add, different clothing. I want you to make an attempt to make it look realistic. I don't want it to be a super hilarious photoshopped ridiculous image with cutout shapes. I want you to actually learn how to merge these features into a photograph of a person. So I am looking for that when I grade you, that you're making an attempt to do that. And then I could probably grab some of this eyebrow to fill in that little cut mark there. All right, that's, I could work on it more, but that's pretty good. So I'm going to back it up, and now all of a sudden she has these creepy vampire eyes. I don't know what this little bar thing is, so if I don't like that, I think I'll just drag it down just a smidge to get rid of that crop tool here. And whoops, a little bit more. Sensitive. Okay, and then that kind of crops it out. Crop. Or maybe not. Let's try it one more time. I don't want it to be right on this hair, but it's being super sensitive. There we go. Okay, so now I got rid of that white bar. So keep on doing it, really pay attention to which layers you're working on. Don't make a bunch of layers that you don't need. Really, just keep it simple. If I wanted to make the figures look a little pastier, I could click on the figure layer, go into my levels here, and maybe make them a little bit pastier looking. Or I could go in and use the clone stamp to do that. But again, I'm kind of going for realism, so I don't want to lose all my value there. And then I could go in and feather that just a little bit, just to make sure it's not a harsh change. And then of course, to save it and turn it in the save as, hang on, before we do that, let's go into image size. And we're going to start really adjusting our image sizes here. You guys don't need to turn in gigantic 24, megabyte files here. So let's just make this like 5 by 3, make it a little bit smaller. And we have to get rid of this constraint here and then just make this 300. So I'm just going to shrink it down, but it'll be much more manageable. Okay, so after you change the file size and you save as, monsters, your last name, desktop is fine, save it as a Photoshop file, and then also, of course, save it as a JPEG. I like you to do this, I've said this several times before, because then I can see immediately what the image is, and then I click on the Photoshop file to make sure you did your layers. Okay, and that is it for today. Thank you so much. Have fun with this one. I wish I could keep working on this right now, and I might just do that. Bye.